Hello and welcome to another edition of Conservative Corner. I am your host, Thom Mountain, and we host this wonderful program at least once a month in and around the Newton area through the courtesy of New TV at our wonderful New TV studios here in Newton Highlands. And we're a program in which we talk about things that won't necessarily be covered by the, shall we say, the mainstream media in and around Newton and in and around the Boston area, in that our title says it all. We are a conservative-leaning program, which means that we will talk about the issues that are of concern to you, and hopefully our very liberal friends and neighbors will also agree, or at least not so much agree, but agree at least that we should be on the air, and hopefully they will tune in as well, because we want them to get involved as well, and we want them to hear our points of view. And we all live in this state, in this city, in this country, and we care deeply about what happens to all of the above. Normally, or many times rather, we delve into, shall we say, partisan politics, but today we're not going to talk about partisan politics at all, because this is a nonpartisan issue. This is an issue which is near and dear not just to the people of Newton, but to Massachusetts and the United States in general. And this, of course, is dealing specifically with Israel's war against the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. We have since passed the 100-day mark, that's over 3 months, well over 3 months, where Israel was attacked viciously in an unprovoked, coordinated attack from Gaza to southern Israel on October 7th, just a few months ago. And the attack left in its wake, within a day, 1,200 to 1,400, mostly Jews, killed, murdered on the spot. They were civilians, they were unarmed, they were brutalized. And when I say brutalized, some of what happened to the victims were straight out of World War II and the Holocaust. And I can't even exaggerate grotesquely what happened to them, but you've heard the stories, and unfortunately I've seen some of the videos, and that is babies being burned alive in ovens, babies being brutally ripped apart, women being brutally assaulted, raped, and then dragged through the streets of Gaza, old people being killed and slaughtered. What does this sound like? What does this remind you of? Well, it reminds you of Poland and Eastern Europe during World War II. And this was the most vicious assault on Jews since World War II. And here we are 3 months later, over 3 months later, and Israel has since had an incursion, or you can call it an invasion, call it what you will, to go into Gaza, the Gaza Strip, which is a strip of land. It's about as big as a city-state. So think of Singapore, Hong Kong, maybe a little bigger, between Egypt and Israel. And the area was not abandoned, but turned over to the to the Arabs, to the Palestinians in 2005. Israel withdrew completely, and when they withdrew everything. They even withdrew, took apart their settlements, their townships, and moved every Israeli, every Jew out of Gaza. Now, Gaza had a choice. Gaza could have become like a Singapore or Hong Kong on the Mediterranean with the full support of Israel. They chose not to do that. Instead, what did they do? They slowly rearmed themselves over a period of nearly 2 decades for the moment that we saw last October. And that moment was to have a surprise attack upon Israel, which in a demonic way, they succeeded very well at it. And they were supported by primarily Iran. And it's sad to say, but the Israeli intelligence and government were caught flat-footed by it. But they've been trying to rectify the matter as best as possible. And the most crucial matter is that there are still, I believe, 130 Israeli civilians there, including some foreign nationals, including some Americans who are still being held captive by the terrorist Hamas. So that being said, we decided to have someone come and talk about it. And that someone is, of course, Jake Donnelly. And we're very glad to have you here, Jake. Thank you for being here. And you are well, tell me what your title is.
Yeah, I'm the Activism Manager for the Israeli American Council of New England.
And that is based in Newton Center at a undisclosed location, but I've been there. It's a very effective place. There's a lot of security around it. and it's a central clearinghouse for people who want to get involved with and for Israel. And you run a remarkable operation. Like I said, it's been there for a while. It just didn't pop up after Gaza. But there have been ups and downs with Israel, and I remember 2 years ago, there was something else that happened out of Gaza. I can't remember specifically, but we had rallies on the Newton Center at which I spoke and others did, and your organization was involved in that as well. But your organization is really a hands-on organization in that you really specifically deal with and encourage the grassroots in America to get involved. And it's also unique in that I've noticed that it's run by a combined effort of Israeli expatriates, that's what you call them, and also Americans in the area. And you're obviously American and you deal with a lot of Israelis, and you combined your efforts together because you saw, well, all of you saw, I'm sure, that there was, shall we say, something missing between, with the larger, most Jewish establishment organizations who do good work and they run good things, and the Jewish grassroots community. So I see that yours is really a bridge to that, and in particular with regards to what's happening in Israel. So please, if you would, tell us what you do.
Yeah, so
what your organization does.
Yeah, so the IAC specifically, we try to be the voice of the Israeli American community in New England. Also very specifically to here locally, not just Greater Boston, but Newton, Brookline, wherever you see Israeli Americans, that's where we try to help out. So my specific position as the activism manager, I respond mostly to incidences of anti-Semitism as well as anti-Israel bias in schools. So since October 7th, I've been just a little bit more than a little bit busy. But you mentioned the fact that we try to be a grassroots organization. The IAC, what used to be Boston and is now IAC New England, because I go to Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, and the rest of the New England states. Yes. All 6 of them, I'm from Connecticut, so I'm one of those holdovers from the one that everybody forgets about. But we try to really activate those members of the community who like to be hands-on. The Israeli people, they have a ton of energy. They have a ton of passion. But one of the hardest things to do when you're a member of the immigrant community is figure out the differences of what's going on in the United States, what's the differences in the federalist system. So when you have a problem at school and you're somebody that's thinking, wait, do I bring this to the state of Massachusetts or do I bring this to my local community? I'm the person that helps out with that, and there are other people in our organization like Noah Vardy, Leifnat Remy, Lital Carmel, Karen Bar-Or, who help out in all the various ways that people need help, from the empty nesters to the young people, Keshet, where we try to teach them a little bit of Hebrew, as well as some home away from home type of things.
So, for example, you would deal with schools, public schools in particular, that shall we say, are going a bit wayward in against Israel or are not really pro-Israel like they should be. And could you mention some examples, or would you like to, of some communities? You don't have to specify which, whatever you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the worst examples that I had to deal with was a Greater Boston city, and there is a mother who has a child, 11 years old. His father was murdered. He was in Israel on October 7th. His father was murdered, and the mother tried for weeks to get somebody at the school to check in on her son every single day. That didn't occur. So when she doesn't have anybody really responding to any of her requests, who does she turn to? That's where I come in. Then I have to be told that the principal of this particular school, when asked, or when he told this mother, why hasn't anybody checked in on my child? There are other children with other needs. That is unconscionable, that is unacceptable, and it's inexcusable. So what have we been doing? We've been working behind the scenes to make sure that something like that never, ever happens again.
You know, Jake, I'll tell you, so from where we are in Newton, to their credit, the Newton Teachers Union, the Teachers Unions are very powerful across the state, and they're a branch of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, or the MTA, Massachusetts, as they're called, came out against Israel and demanded a ceasefire. Now, what would a ceasefire mean? Well, that means that Israel gives up everything and just goes back, and Hamas stays in power. Now, to the credit, the Newton Teachers Association rejected that, and it was one of the few districts to reject that. And we give them credit for it, we really do. And we're glad, and we like to see other teachers' unions across the state do that. But have they? Have other teachers' unions come out like Newton?
No, for the most part, it's been the Newton Teachers Association. I know they're dealing with a lot of different issues right now, currently on strike. I could not be more supportive of the Newton Teachers Association. Yes. I know that we have elections coming up in November 2024, but for somebody like me, I'm at this point a one-issue voter. And if you ask me, do I support or do I not support the Newton Teachers Association? By the Newton Teachers Association coming out against the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which incorrectly called for a ceasefire, which incentivizes more terrorism, more murder of not just Jewish Israelis, but Muslim Israelis, of everybody else.
And we also have a problem with the universities now. The national focus has been on Harvard around here, mostly Harvard, MIT secondarily. And we've seen what happens when university presidents just become so blatantly blind to anti-Semitism on their campus. They tend not to last there a long time, as we saw with Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard University, which was extraordinary. She basically had to leave because of that. And we've seen that with Harvard. But other universities that that won't necessarily make the headlines, Tufts, UMass, Amherst, and others. Now, much to my delight, my alma mater, Brandeis, is not in any of those categories, and it shouldn't be, because it's a Jewish-sponsored university, the only one of its kind in the country, or one of the few. But nevertheless, the college campuses, what's happening there is really incredibly disturbing. And from my background, 40 years ago, I'm an old guy, so I was in college in the early 80s, and I was a campus activism, a Zionist campus activism, pro-Israel, but long before I got involved in Republican politics. And the general consensus among the universities, among that age group, which is my age group now, was everyone was pro-Israel. Very few people were not pro-Israel, so at the time we protested against the PLO. Now what I'm seeing, and it's a very disturbing trend, and I've seen it in several polls where many, if not most, of the young people, under 30 crowd, are not only not pro-Israel, but are pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas to a point, and I don't want to say PLO, but, and I read one poll where 84% of young Americans, I believe it's under the age of 25, support the war, support Gaza and its war against Israel. And it's unconscionable for me. I think I understand why this happened, just over the trend over the decades, where the whole, and I think that this is connected, where you have the whole extreme left-wing ideology in the schools, which is anti-colonial and anti-Western and anti-imperialist, and they throw Israel into that batch. And then you come out with the idea that Israel is an oppressive nature, which you and I both know. The thought of it is really absurd for several reasons. First, Israel's a small country of 7 million people, surrounded by a huge array of neighbors that are Arab, Muslim, and some of whom are not hostile, but the vast majority of whom are. And so times have changed. In other words, people of my generation, the over 60 crowd, 95% of us, I read in a poll, are pro-Israel. And it's much less with the younger generation. And that's not only sad, but it's really alarming for the future. That I said, what is your take on that? You're of that generation. You're not under 30, but you're a youngster still.
Yeah, and so I have these conversations with many of my friends, and what I try to get to the bottom of is, why do they believe these things? Where did these thoughts come from? Because if you went for a clean slate and you said, let's take Israel versus any of the other neighbors in the Middle East, if you're an American, you would, by pure dint of being an American, side with Israel. What do I mean by that? I mean freedom of speech. I mean freedom of religion, because when you're in Israel, you have the religion of Judaism. Of course, 7 million of the 9 million that live in Israel adhere to the religion that I do, Judaism. But then you also have 21% that are Arab Israeli. Those are the Muslims. You have the Druze, you have the Baha'i. So you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of religion. In Tel Aviv, you have the only place where members of the LGBTQIA+ community can exist and exist proudly. Go anywhere in Tel Aviv in July and tell me if that is a warm and welcoming society. Everybody knows that to be the case. Now, try to do that in Jenin, try to do that in Ramallah, in Gaza City, entirely
These are
different.
Palestinian-run cities in the West Bank. Yeah.
Exactly. And those freedoms do not exist. Women driving doesn't exist. So
In those
communities. And that's what I try to get down to people. We have the whole Me Too movement. I, as somebody that likes to believe he can be fairly rational and logical, cannot understand how those that adhere and rightfully support the Me Too movement are also anti-Israel. And those are the ones, exactly, that are defending and excusing what happened on October 7th when dozens, and I've seen the full 47 minutes of uncensored footage from Israel when it was played at Harvard, thanks to Bill Ackman and his wonderful activism. Wonderful.
Yep.
And he's not even on the right wing. He is very much not so. But he decides what is right, what is wrong. And that's what he's been pushing.
But you know, Jake, when this first happened and we saw all of the Massachusetts leadership coming together and the national leadership coming together on behalf of Israel, and this was on October, and I was at that rally. I didn't get to speak, but I was at that rally in the Boston Common. It was a wonderful rally held by the governor, and the two senators were there, and Congressman Jake Auchincloss, whom I credit for supporting Israel.
Staunch support.
Yeah, this was a good event, but then I felt, and I think accurately, that over time this support will dilute as the weeks and the months go by. Now again, I'm not getting into partisan politics here because everyone knows where I stand. I'm on the Republican State Committee. However, I will say this, at least as of now, Congress is still in Israel's corner. The White House is, at least on paper and in the rhetoric, in Israel's corner to a point. But I fear that as time goes on, that will be diluted. But what I'm really concerned with now is, and I want to ask you about this, there are so many people in the greater Boston area, Jews and Christians alike, who really want to do something concrete as much as they can for Israel. Now, for example, there's a group of people, a small group of people that I know, on their own who are going to Israel in the springtime to help out in whatever way they can. One of my neighbors just came back from a Jewish National Fund mission to Israel, where very simply they went down to the communities around Gaza, the Jewish communities around Gaza, and they were picking oranges and grapefruit. And he told me that it's estimated that 80% to 100% of the citrus harvest is gone. Why? Because of the war, and also the foreign workers, legal workers who were there had to go home or went home. So the agricultural community in Israel is being devastated. But I think that, but again, people want to know what they can do in big or small ways. There's a lady who's running for local office, and she started this beforehand, who started a program to basically knit sweaters or knit scarves with her knitting group for soldiers in Israel. Little things like that, but then there's bigger things that can be done. So if you can tell or at least give some advice to people in the community what they can do or should do for Israel.
Yeah, so every single Sunday there's a Run for Their Lives, which is in honor of the hostages, the about 130 hostages, which are still being kept in captivity by Hamas right now in Gaza. And then there's also, you can donate to IAC360.com, Stand with Israel. That is our particular. We have raised both in terms of money as well as in tactical gear, medical gear, and things like baby formula and things like this.
IAC360.
IAC360.com/stand-with-Israel.
Okay.
But if you just type in IAC360, Stand with Israel, it will bring you right to the donation page. And those donations go immediately to the kibbutzim, to the, I can never say it in English correctly, but the kibbutzes, there we go. In Israel, as well as all of the other areas that are currently in need. And this is what everybody must understand. everywhere in Israel right now, there is a need. More than 200,000 Israelis have been displaced. So yes, you have the problems with the harvests, which are near and dear to my heart as somebody that grew up on a farm in a farm town. You've seen the stories of the Montana farmers, Christians who just immediately hopped on a plane, went and helped out. Wonderful. These are people who, just from the kindness and goodness of their hearts, went to help out a community in need. And that's what Israel is right now. It is, yes, a country, yes, a nation, but Israel is a community. It's a family that's in dire need right now.
You know, Jake, one of the things that was very disturbing that I saw, and well, I'll tell you without beating around the bush what it was, on the Massachusetts Turnpike, Route 90 eastbound, I think you know what I'm going to say, in Alston, there are two massive billboards, and one of them says, "Pray for Palestine," the other one says, "Save Gaza." And they're right there, they're illuminated at night, and coming up the Southeast Expressway, there's a similar one, Save Gaza. And I like to think that in our very educated state, people are smarter than that. But still, when you see these every day, and hundreds of thousands of vehicles, cars, go past them every single day. And I alerted the powers that be, CJP, JCRC, the Jewish establishment leadership here, about them, and I haven't heard anything back. And these billboards are put up by Clear Channel. Now, people will say, well, it's a freedom of speech issue. Okay, I understand that, but still, if anyone's out there listening who can do something about it, pressure should be brought to bear against Clear Channel for having those up. And pressure should be brought to bear. Yes, you know, independent billboard operators can put up whatever they like. However, we have a right to protest against them and try to talk them out of it. And I think whatever levers can be pulled should be pulled to try to get those down, because they're just so damn disturbing and offensive. They really, really are. And deceiving, deceptive. I mean, it's unbelievable that just the magnitude of the nerve of them to do that, really. And it's really appalling. And one very fallacious argument that I'm hearing is, well, the response from Israel is disproportionate. You know, there's 1,400 Israelis were killed, and you're killing in response hundreds or rather thousands of Gazans. And so, you know, my response to them is, well, and then they also say, well, there's not enough humanitarian aid coming into Gaza. Well, my response to them is very simple, twofold. Number one, during World War II, did the U.S. allow humanitarian aid into Japan and Germany while they were bombing it? The answer is, of course, no. And as I recall, there were 3,000 Americans killed at Pearl Harbor. And by the end of the war, civilians alone, about 800,000 Japanese, including with the two atomic bomb droppings, were killed by the American Air Force. And about 500,000 Germans were killed by the American and British Air Forces during World War II. And I don't recall Winston Churchill or Franklin Roosevelt sending humanitarian aid into Berlin and Munich during World War II. And I don't recall anyone complaining about the dropping of bombs on Hamburg, Dresden, Berlin, et cetera, because that's what you needed to win a war. And I would equate the Hamas terrorists, the Hamas army, terrorist army, with the Nazis. They certainly behaved like Nazis, and in order to defeat the Nazis, this is what you have to do. And I wish Israel wouldn't bow to pressure, but nevertheless they are. So I would ask any Americans who use these arguments, look at your own history. And the Americans did what was necessary to defeat the evil Axis powers of Japan and Germany in World War II, and they did it to great effect.
So you asked the question earlier how people my generation could possibly defend Hamas and what Hamas and Hezbollah is doing right now and all of the other various Iranian proxies. To me, it's very simple. I'm the son of a United States Marine Corps tanker from Vietnam. So I was brought up reading Ernie Pyle. I was brought up on the greatness of America. Yes, America is extremely flawed, but America has always strived to be a greater country. The ideal of Frederick Douglass. That's what America is about. If you know your history, though, you would know that how Israel is responding right now is in direct proportion to what its goal is. Its goal right now is to eradicate Hamas. As you mentioned, is anybody asking how the United Kingdom responded by bombing Dresden and killing 100,000 Germans in World War II? No. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Was it justified? You betcha. Operation Meeting House, March 9th and 10th in 1945, when the United States military killed 100,000 Japanese in one single day.
In Tokyo.
In Tokyo. Is that one of the worst things to ever happen? Absolutely. Whose fault was that? The Japanese. By bombing Pearl Harbor in a sneak attack, by corrupting their own Bushido culture, which is how you get things like the Bataan Death March.
Yes,
there's a lot of beheading, there's a lot of decapitation in all of these. Same thing with the Nazis. Same thing with the Einsatz Group and the Special Police Battalion 101. These are the things that we don't talk about in school any longer because we're so afraid that we're going to, by simply teaching history, traumatize our children. But what's more traumatizing, just real quick, not knowing your history and allowing the unequivocal murder of 1,200 Israelis, or teaching history and making sure that people understand that evil does in fact exist, and the only way to root it out is by being strong and understanding what can happen if you don't learn from history.
That's right. You know, Jake, I had a pastor friend of mine who said to me, and he said, you know, Tom, the Islamic terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, they're all the same. First, they're going after the Saturday people, meaning the Jews who have the Sabbath on a Saturday. Then they're going to come after the Sunday people, meaning the Christians who have the Sabbath on a Sunday. And that's demonstrated. And they will start in Israel and then move across Europe into America. And you have to wonder how many of these terrorist cells are in America just waiting to pop up and waiting to spring upon the rest of us. But we have about a minute or so left. And I know that you can't specify where the center is. Your center is the Newton Center. It's a wonderful, it's like a warehouse that has all these supplies. But can you give us some more addresses or hints, or can you repeat some of them that you gave before? How people can help?
So right now, the best way to help is by going to IAC360.com, stand-with-Israel. Donate there. All of that money that you donate to the IAC and IAC New England is going to go to causes that will immediately impact Israelis on the ground right now.
I also saw, I get a lot of the news feed from Israel in Hebrew and English, and one thing that I saw which was very touching, it's an religious Israeli soldier about your age, and he's saying, please people, we need your prayers. We need your tefillot. That's what he was saying, but we need your prayers. And really that matters right now, I would say as well. So Jake, it's been a pleasure. Again, half an hour goes by quickly, but we're very glad that you're here. And I see that you're wearing the pendant in support of the hostages that are still there. Bring them home now. And we hope that they will be brought home certainly this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom.
For being with us today. And we hope to have you on in a few months to do a catch-up. And hopefully, we assume and hope that things will have improved in Israel. Thank you so much.
My dad and I are really close. I know he wants the best for me and will do whatever he can to secure a safe future for me. That's why I decided to bring up HeatSmart, a city-sponsored initiative making it easier than ever to step away from fossil fuels and reimagine the way we heat and cool our homes. Upgrading to clean, efficient, heat pump technology will likely be one of the biggest positive impacts you ever make for our environment. This volunteer-led HeatSmart initiative promotes and installs heat pump technology, which is 2 to 4 times more efficient than a fossil fuel heating system and will improve your comfort year-round. WePower.com/HeatSmartNewton makes it easy to access personal coaching and resources on financially smart home efficiency options. Visit our site and click Get Started to contact a handy, helpful HeatSmart representative today. It's time to move on from fossil fuels. Take advantage of financial incentives and work with local vetted installers to help fight climate change with HeatSmart.